Welcome to the Low Carb USA podcast, where we seek to inspire you to help us build this community. I'm Doug Reynolds.
And this is Pam Devine.
Hey, Doug.
How's it, Nick? How you doing, man?
Good. How are you?
Awesome. So, Nick, I introduced you. So, Nick is one of the very active committee members on our Society of Metabolic Health Practitioners, a new nonprofit that we've been working on. And he's very active there, and we're going to talk about that a little later. But we had like a town hall meeting for all the new members, and I asked Nick I introduced Nick, and I was so excited about having a young guy and that I'd never really paid attention to his story. And I didn't realize that he had come into it as most people have up till this stage, and that is because they were trying to fix a problem. And he has a really interesting story that he put out a YouTube video literally today about it, and I'll post that in the show notes. But just for everybody, especially the ones that don't have video, Nick, if you could just tell your story, it's pretty compelling.
Yeah, I'll go through it a little bit, and thanks for the introduction, Doug. That's very generous and sweet of you. So, yeah, like most people, I didn't really think too much about keto before I was forced into or low carb until I was forced to really look at my nutrition. So I never struggled with weight throughout my entire life, and I ate a pretty standard diet. I'm just one of those people that I just doesn't gain weight very easily. So in that respect, I'm lucky. And I thought, then I just escaped whatever metabolic disease. You look at me, I was like skinny, healthy, running around kid. But things started to catch up with me as soon as, the end of college. So I was still pretty young. I was 18. Actually, no, I should rewind. Before that, I was at the end of high school, really. I started getting bone problems. And then I was diagnosed with osteoporosis, which is really weird. As a young male without osteoporosis in my family, having never had a fracture until the age of 18, like, why would I start getting bone problems? It was so weird, in fact, that nobody would even give me a bone scan. For years, I was getting fractures. I'm like, can I get a bone scan? They're like, no, you're healthy. Like normal BMI, runner, male, no history, family history, you don't have like a bone disease. So it took years to just get a basic bone scan. They're like, oh, yeah, you have osteoporosis. So that was weird. And that kind of sucked. And I thought that was just a one-off. There was some weird thing in my genetics. I did a lot of research on it. I worked at MGH for a summer. Actually had a case report on my bones, just as a weirdity. And then I thought it was done. That was it. Until end of college, another thing came for me, and that was ulcerative colitis, which is an inflammatory bowel disease. So I used to have, I literally would eat anything from like ice cream cake to duck's tongue to cow heart, whatever. I had no food aversions, and I just love food. I love to cook, love to do anything with food. And then I started to just, get terrible bloody diarrhea, everything that comes with ulcerative colitis. And it got really, really bad. I've published a little bit or written, insights into some of the graphic stories. Like before, I'll share one. I didn't share this until I shared it on Cecile's Metabolic Multiplier recently, because this is one of those like invisible diseases that people try to hide because it's kind of embarrassing, but I'll just be open about it. So I was 22 when it was really starting to hit me, and I was lucky enough to be the valedictory speaker at my college. So I went to Dartmouth, and the morning of graduation, so I had to give this big speech in front of 11,000 people after a professional comedian. I was really nervous, and so I had just started being hit by this colitis, not really knowing how to deal with it. So to prepare, I didn't eat anything for 24 hours, then gave myself I didn't know about phosphate enemas. I hadn't been really medicated. So I had to give myself a Cosby enema at 3 a.m. And then I was just nervous all morning. And even then, when I was walking up to the stage, I had some feelings in my gut, and there was a little bit of blood in my pants afterwards. I don't know how bad it could have been, but the entire time, you can see the video on YouTube. Hopefully I don't show it, but that entire morning and that entire day, all I could think about wasn't the happiness of graduation, wasn't that I got this great opportunity to speak. I'd rehearsed the speech, but all I could think about was my gut and how scared I was that something would happen. And that just, that's like what a day in the life of somebody with severe colitis or even really bad IBS looks like. And it just got worse and worse. And then it climaxed when I moved to Oxford. So after I finished my undergraduate at Dartmouth, I went to Oxford to do a PhD there. And within a few weeks of moving there, new country by myself, I had a really bad flare, lost 20% of my body weight in a couple weeks. And I was in the palliative care ward of a NHS hospital with a heart rate that was in the 20s, and nobody could tell me why. And I spent 3 days there. I was discharged with a heart rate in the 20s. Don't know how they did that, but I was. And that was it. You would think the straw broke the camel's back before then, but that was really the straw that broke the camel's back, because I realized that whatever I was doing wasn't working. I don't blame the doctors. They were trying to do their best, but I tried all sorts of meds and they were not working. They were just making things worse, to be honest. And so I really started to delve into the literature. Like everybody before me, I was just at Low Carb Boca, and you can hear the stories of all these amazing people on the shoulders of giants is an understatement about how I feel. But like everybody, I just started reading papers and more papers and more papers and more papers. And then even after that, I was still a skeptic. I'm just like, oh, low carb, keto, that's a fad, right? And we can talk about why it's not later. But then I said to myself, I have no expectation, but also I have nothing to lose. So what the hell? So I went for it. And after all these meds not working and my life being crap for so many years, I remember within a week, my colitis symptoms just went away. They just went away completely. And I asked my GI doc, I was actually home for vacation at the time, can I get a repeat of this stool marker? It's called fecal calprotectin. It's an inflammatory marker of the bowel. And he's like, no, we just got one a week ago. It doesn't really make sense. It's not going to change in that much time. But he's a really open-minded, sweet guy. And I was going back to Oxford, and it's harder to get there in the NHS. So he's like, all right, you know what? Let's just get it. You're feeling better. Let's just get it. What the heck? And it had dropped to the lowest it had ever been. It was hovering around like 150, which is 3 times the high of normal, high of healthy. It dropped to 20, which is really low and within healthy. And then over time, I just titrated off my medications. My calprotectin never has come back up. My colitis is just, as far as I'm concerned, gone. I'm not worried about it at all. I'm not in perfect health. I don't think anybody's ever in perfect health, but it's gone. And even my bones have recovered. Now I am on some medications for that, but I have reason to believe that my nutrition has actually accelerated or improved the efficacy of the medications, because some of my cortical bone, like my hip and my spine, they were not helping. The medications alone were not helping. The most powerful medications, Forteo and Prolia, they weren't helping until I went low carb, and then my other bones other than my spine started to strengthen. So it's kind of been remarkable. And what I say in the documentary, and I think this is very true, is the most remarkable thing about my story is that it's not at all unique, like not at all. I've met so many people since that have had very similar stories of just complete transformation, loss of hope, and then just recovering from remarkable metabolic disease far beyond what I went through. And people who just use it to really just get in shape and lose weight and feel better. It really has broad spectrum efficacy. So I'm excited about food as medicine, excited about metabolic medicine, and I just feel phenomenally lucky. This is the last thing I'll say. I know I'm going rambling before I let you have something to say, but being at these conferences, like we were at Low Carb USA Boca last weekend, and hearing about all the amazing work that the speakers have done over decades, to think that I feel like I just hit this at the right time, that I came into the space just at the right time, just as this is about to take off. And all the work that's come before me, I didn't really have to suffer for that long before I found a solution. And I'm hoping that'll be the pattern where people, have this as an accessible solution, as an option for their health more and more. So I'll shut up now.
So you're really lucky that you had access to these papers and that you know how to read them and that you could find this solution for yourself. But I think the problem is for most people that they don't have the ability or the access or both. And so they're out there in the wilderness, and, you know, the current medical community is the regular community is just feeding them a bunch of BS, and so they're never getting better. And that's really sad, but and exciting that, like you said, at the same time, that it does really feel like we're on the cusp of an explosion here, where it's actually going to take off. It's really cool to feel like you can be a part of that, you know.
Yeah, it's very exciting.
Just quickly to go back to the meds, did you titrate yourself off those meds yourself, or did you
I did
have help?
I'm not recommending that, but I did.
Yeah, well, and that was what I wanted to point out, is that that's one of the things with this whole ketogenic or low carb diet, is that you change. You've said it, like within a week, your metabolism changes so quickly that if you are on medications to kind of deal with the situation that you're trying to address, and you don't titrate them really quickly, you can actually end up in trouble effectively from you know, taking too much of the meds that cause that problem. So just, note to anybody else, if you're on any kind of medication and you decide to embark on this lifestyle or this diet, please make sure that you find a doctor who understands this whole concept, so that they can help you get off your meds.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And I also just, while speaking about doctors, you just mentioned, you know, that doctors or the standard medical establishment feeds a lot of BS to people. And I agree, but I want to build on that point. And because I just see a lot of doctor bashing, especially like on Twitter and in social media. And I want to dispel the myth that doctors know everything or should know everything, especially about nutrition. I think this is an education crisis. That's what I want to help out with. And what you have to understand is that doctors are people. They're just people that got 4 more years of school. There's only so much you can learn in 4 years. And for worse, I'm not even going to say for better or for worse, because it is for worse, they don't get taught nutrition. They just don't. It's not really their fault. It's the system's fault. So leave it to people and patients to teach their doctors, because we're all starting, most of us, whether or not we have an MD, are starting from the same baseline. I've literally met doctors who didn't know that honey was a carbohydrate. I'm not even kidding. Or, you know, said I'm low carb, and you ask them what they're eating, and they're having a banana and orange juice with a bagel as part of their breakfast. They think carbohydrates are just like sugar. That is the state of knowledge that some physicians have. It's remarkable, and it's not their fault. They might be brilliant in their field for what they learned, but they just haven't been given this information yet. But I think it's coming. And I actually think that patients can feed it to their doctors. So don't be afraid to try to furnish your clinician with some information. Ask them, you know, get good resources. Ask them, will you look at this? Will you help me out on this journey? Can we learn about this together? I think that clinicians really do want to help. I just want to emphasize that. If they're not out to get you, they're not trying to make, you know, money for themselves. If they did that, if they want to do that, they go into like hedge funding or something. They're smart people. They can make money other ways. Clinicians do care. So I think we're all on the same team when it comes to improving health. Yeah,
I do agree with that, you know, they haven't been exposed to during their training. But I do have a bit of a problem down the road where some of them are presented with all this evidence and presented with this information, and then they refuse to acknowledge it or even consider offering it as an option to their patients or whatever. And that's where I start to feel like, okay, at that point.
Yeah, 100%. I don't know if you've seen the little cartoon, I forget who did it, but it says some people have made up their minds and don't want to be confused by data.
Right.
I feel like a lot of people are in that vein, that they're just like, oh no, this is the way it is. This is the standard guidelines. This is, you know, what we know, and that's it. And it's like, well, if the standard guidelines were working, we wouldn't have obesity, diabetes, and Alzheimer's pandemics that are just taking off. It's funny to look at actually like, you know, correlation may not be causation, but if you want a natural experiment, if you look at the trend of obesity, it's like obesity increasing, standard guidelines implemented. Oh, look, an acceleration in obesity. That's interesting.
Right. Yeah, and like you say, you know, associational data is just that. But I always feel like we should never dismiss it, because it should be cause for concern. So investigate further, at least, or something. You know, and you may find, okay, that wasn't the cause, but you may find it was. That's where associational data is valuable. I sometimes have a bit of a problem where people dismiss, that's just associational, that's just anecdotal, and they dismiss it outright, and that's not always the best thing.
It's the basis for coming up with hypotheses, and then you need to test those hypotheses.
Yes.
You know, it's also actually, I think, decent at refuting hypotheses. So if you have, you know, the hypothesis that saturated fat causes heart disease, if you see a correlation between saturated fat and heart disease, I don't think you can conclude that saturated fat causes heart disease. However, if you see the opposite correlation, it's actually kind of good at refuting that hypothesis, if you know what I mean. Mm. Which is actually what we see now when we look at the data. So
yeah.
Anyway.
So what you were talking about, patients going to their doctors and stuff like that, I think kind of dovetails into the rest of the discussion that we wanted to have about the SMHP. So the Society of Metabolic Health Practitioners that I mentioned is a new nonprofit that literally just launched a few weeks ago. That a lot of us that are involved with it are pretty excited about for a lot of reasons. One of the things that we have done, so we developed a set of clinical guidelines for doctors who do decide they want to sort of embrace this intervention, to basically give them guidelines of how to actually do this in practice. And we published it on the Low Carb USA site, but it wasn't the right place for it. And in the meantime, we've, you know, with a bunch of great people like Trey Kalasian and Adele Height and that, we've come up with this concept of putting in place this nonprofit organization. And so those clinical guidelines have migrated over there. And I think it's 9, it's been translated now into 9 different languages. And there's buttons there where you can download a PDF of these guidelines. And that's what we're really encouraging people to do, is download those clinical guidelines and take them to your doctor and say, please, I believe that this is going to help me, and I need you to help me do this. And here's some guidelines that might help you. Who knows? If you take it to your doctor, hopefully some of them are going to bin it, right? But there's going to be some of them that
find a new doctor,
actually take it to heart, and that's awesome.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head, Doug. And you know, I am so phenomenally excited about the Society for Metabolic Health Practitioners. Adele Height describes it as, she said, one voice for metabolic health. It's this big tent approach to just metabolic health. I think the emphasis is on low carb because the data seems to be that for the reversal of metabolic diseases, you know, there's a lot of efficacy, but it's not necessarily restricted to that. And it's not restricted to say just per se nutrition. It's just trying to focus on metabolic health and metabolic medicine for metabolic disease. And I think that is where the disconnect is in the current medical system. We have this pharmacological approach to metabolic disease. Now, you know, drugs have their place, and we have a great system for dealing with infectious disease, more or less. We can talk about COVID later, although I still think that intersects with metabolic disease. But with the diseases that are really a problem, obesity, diabetes, Alzheimer's, cardiovascular disease, we are so underpowered, and we're just so missing the boat. We need metabolic medicine for these metabolic diseases. And that really, you know, comes down to, well, nutrition is the biggest root. The way I describe it is it's kind of like a tree. So if you imagine a tree, there's a bunch of different branches, and all the branches have different foliage, like different symptoms of different diseases. One branch might be Alzheimer's, one branch might be obesity, what have you. But they all have this common trunk, these common pathologies. Inflammation, insulin resistance, oxidative stress, they all unite these diseases. They're all like one thing, and all these pathologies are fed by the same roots, which are lifestyle factors. poor sleep, chronic stress, sedentary lifestyle. And I think the biggest root that even feeds the other roots is nutrition. That's foundational. And our nutrition system is just screwed up. I think that's where we have to start. It's not the end and it's not the only root, but it's a huge piece of the puzzle.
Like I said, when I introduced you, I was really excited about the fact that you were a young guy, because most of us in this space have got here because we've been sick or struggling with our health and trying to find a way. And for the most part, those metabolic diseases start to manifest themselves later in life. And so the demographic here in our meetings and everything is always slightly older, way older than you. And so it's always exciting to find someone who's young, who gets it. And you know, unfortunately, you had to be really sick to find this. But one of my beliefs is that yes, it's a brilliant intervention, not necessarily the only one, but a brilliant intervention for a lot of these metabolic diseases. But it's not just about an intervention for once you're sick. What I really believe is we should be encouraging the healthy people, the younger people, to be eating right from the beginning so that they don't get sick in the first place. You know, you keep talking about the US dietary guidelines and, oh, they're only for healthy people. But that's also garbage, because yes, they're healthy while they're eating that. That damn diet is going to make them unhealthy. So it's not for healthy people. It's just not. And so what I really wanted to ask you was, as a young person, how do you feel we can reach the younger generation? Because I know I was like that. I'm bulletproof, right? I could run marathons and do whatever I wanted, eat whatever I wanted, and I didn't even notice anything. It only started affecting me as I got older. How do we reach the younger people and encourage them to adopt a healthier lifestyle, including this nutrition, just because they know it's better? It's like, okay, you shouldn't smoke because it's, you know, it's the same thing. How do we get to where people feel when they're young that they need to live this lifestyle, eat this way, so that they don't get sick later in life?
Yeah, that's a really difficult question. But I think it comes down to changing nutrition from something people think of as a chore and as restriction to thinking about it as a really fun opportunity. I say that, you know, I used to love food when I was an adolescent. And I would eat whatever, and it was a really nice gustatory pleasure for me. Like everybody, food tastes good. Simple as that. And then I went through all I went through, and actually during that time, food was a terror. Like I didn't want to, like food scared me. I knew I had to eat to try to nourish my body, but that was it. Like whatever I could do to get energy into my body. If I could have just injected food and never ate again, I would have taken that choice. After I discovered this low carb and everything, and just metabolic health, and started reading about it, when my health came back and I was able to enjoy food without being scared of it, not only was it a gustatory pleasure again, but it was an experimental one. What I realized was this tool is not about getting me, you know, to quote absence of metabolic disease healthy, so like zero, you know, from negative to zero. It's about getting me to positive and continuing to push that positive value. So let's take the young healthy person who's at, you know, say zero because they don't have any metabolic diseases. We have to show them that, look, this is a tool that you can use to get better, and that the process is fun, a gustatory and experimental pleasure. And so bringing making nutrition science and metabolic health science engaging, which is what I think one of my big missions is to do, I think is going to be the key to getting people to care about this before they're motivated by their own metabolic catastrophe. So that was kind of the vision behind. I have a book coming out with my partner Martina Slariova, a keto diet app, and we put out this keto cookbook. It's Mediterranean keto mesh. We kind of the Mediterranean's popular, so you could say we're using it as a Trojan horse of sorts. It's not like pro grains or saturated fat fearing, but it's furnished with, information, cool information for the science nerds, like omega ratios on every recipe, but also fun facts. So, for little kids, you could teach them, you get them engaged at a really young age, in kindergarten, like, oh, Timmy, why do you think salmon are pink? And then you could explain to them that salmon are pink because they express this antioxidant astaxanthin, which helps protect. I'd have to think about how to communicate it, but anyway, aside from that, I think nutrition can be made very engaging, and it can be shown to be a tool for optimization. And once people get on their own nutrition and metabolic health journey and they see the effects it has in whatever they care about, their performance, their biomarkers, I really do think we need biofeedback, like CGMs and beyond for everybody, then I think this will become more mainstream. There's so many kids now, my generation, so ridiculously achievement and college driven. I think high school is just like a toxic environment. It's college. If you show people that, like, look, you can improve your cognitive function and your by improving your metabolism and thinking about this stuff like nutrition, then it becomes like, oh, I need this tool. There's a lot of different angles you can approach it, but it comes down to showing that this is a tool for everybody. For going beyond zero, for absence metabolic health, for optimizing yourself as a human being.
Yeah, that was a big theme this past weekend at the conference at Dr. Ben Bakikio's talk. Mm-hmm. He was talking about what is metabolic health, right?
I was thinking about that actually.
It doesn't just mean an absence of disease. No. There's a difference between not having disease and being properly metabolically healthy. And I think that's what I was trying to get at, is like, we need to teach people from a young age that this is just like smoking's not good for you. Eating certain things is not good for you either. And that this is preferable. If you want to be your best now and as you progress through life, then this is what you need to do. Don't smoke and eat right. So
I think, forgive me for saying this, and you can take the conversation whatever you want, direction you want. I'm honored to be here and it's your podcast, but
that's fine.
I'm enjoying being on our little soapboxes here, and I like sharing my story, but maybe it'd be fun to actually, rather than, I know I'm a young guy, I know I have a lot of energy, I'm excited, and I could just do this with you forever. Maybe let's just choose a topic and delve into it a little bit. I'd love to talk about it, get your thoughts. We can do it. I had a nice conversation about cholesterol with a friend, Raphael Sertoli, on his YouTube channel the other day. That could be something we could talk about, or calories or whatever. What do you think the topic that people are interested in that you haven't covered recently? I know you just had Gary Tabbs on, so I probably shouldn't try to follow him when it comes to calories, but I think it'd be fun to actually delve into a little bit of science, something people might be interested in, and then talk about that a little bit, if that's okay.
Do you mean now?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, go. Yeah, no, absolutely. We got at least half an hour here before I'd probably want to start trying to call an end to it. But yeah, I mean, I think the majority of people that watch this podcast are pretty well versed in this.
Okay.
So,
so should I go hard? I'll put a high bar up.
Yeah. Put it out there. I mean, we've talked the jollies now, so go ahead and start digging into the science. They can drop off if they.
All right.
It's too much for them.
One of my favorite topics, as one of Dave Feldman's lean mass hyperresponder phenotype, is cholesterol, and the myths and the facts and the unknowns about high LDL in particular. And so I've been trying to learn a lot about that. Dr. Richard Isaacson at Cornell Alzheimer's Prevention just got me on to. Peter Attia has a 7-hour podcast with this guy, Dr. Tom Dayspring, and then a follow-up podcast to it. So this was during the Low Carb USA. Well, I wasn't listening to 9 hours a day of Low Carb USA. I had 9 hours of this podcast on top of that. But it's so interesting. The guy is really informed, I have to say, and yet I really don't agree with him at the same time. So it's one of those things where, like, you can learn a lot from people that don't necessarily share your perspective. But he was talking a lot about medicating ApoB and the medication options that were available. and making me wonder about the whole, not the LDL hypothesis, but his whole point was, or here's something that never is retrospect. Here's something that never came up. I'd like to know your thoughts, Doug. In the 9 hours of the podcast, there was this presumption that high LDL, or more specifically high ApoB particle count, high LDL particle count, alone is sufficient to drive atherosclerosis. And my understanding, and what I've learned from like David Diamond and stuff, is not at all true. That there's no data suggesting. One, there's no data suggesting that in the absence of inflammation and oxidative stress, high LDL is damaging. Now, absence of evidence isn't evidence of absence, but there's no data to suggest that's the case. And there's also zero data to suggest that statins or other LDL lowering medications have ever shown benefit in people with high HDL and low triglycerides who are non-smokers. Do you think I'm correct in those two statements?
But yeah, no, this whole LDL story, just like, I don't know, it freaks me out. It really does. That's why I love having David there, because he's a scientist. He's not a medical practitioner. So he can say these things. He just says LDL does not cause cardiovascular disease. It does. And so one of the things is, like, when you talk with the cardiologist or something like that, suddenly they're in a clinical setting. And now they have to be a little bit more guarded about what they say. But I totally agree with him. When I look at all the data that I've been able to look at, that there is nothing that shows that statins help. Or lowering LDL helps. That's really what, using the statin or any other method of lowering LDL, it does not have a benefit.
Well, there's a caveat to that, and in fact that in clinical trials, statins do help in the general population who is profoundly metabolically unhealthy. And I think that if you have high LDL levels for certain reasons, aside from boosting LDL potentially to ship more triglycerides around the body, then, or I guess that would be VLDL, but then maybe it can be a benefit. If you're not taking, the pill alone in absence of everybody else, if you're eating a standard American diet, might decrease your cardiovascular mortality. And then a question arose, and I'm just playing devil's advocate because more or less I see eye to eye with you. I'll just disclose that my LDL is phenomenally high, above 500 right now, and I'm not medicating. My triglyceride to HDL ratio is below 0.5. No HSCRP that can be measured, no inflammation that can be measured. My HSCRP is below 0.3, my F2 isoprostane below 0.47. They're non-measurably low. So I'm not particularly concerned. Having said that, I think it's important to acknowledge that not all people are optimally metabolically healthy, and some may have pre-existing endothelial damage. So then a question arises, what are the options available? And Tro had an awesome talk at Low Carb Boca just showing that people on low carb, he was able to drop in his case series, I think it was LDL like 400 points, about from 575 to 189, if I'm correct. And 189 is below the threshold on which everybody apparently is supposed to be on a statin. And he was really frustrated because he was taking these data to cardiologists and they were just not interested. It's like, look, a lifestyle intervention can drop LDL 400 points. Statins can't do that. On average, it's 30 to 80 milligrams per deciliter.
Yeah, but
So,
I was talking to him literally the day before the conference about that. And he said he showed it to 15 or 16 cardiologists, and not one of them was even vaguely interested. All of them just said to him, well, why didn't you put him on a statin? That was their response. It's like, they didn't care.
I don't think people, and let's delve into a little bit of the medications and how they work. Because if you think about how statins work, it's kind of I think, a stupid mechanism. They inhibit HMG-CoA reductase. Right. So relevant to people on a low-carb diet, that is not only the rate-limiting enzyme in cholesterol synthesis, that is a rate-limiting enzyme in ketone synthesis. So your rate-limiting enzyme in ketone synthesis in your liver has just been inhibited. Now, we don't know if that creates a bottleneck for energy supply, If you're a lean mass hyperresponder, it might. I'm not sure. I don't think those data are there, but it's possible. In general, you're just inhibiting ketone synthesis, not only in the liver, but also in the brain. So there's de novo or in situ ketone synthesis in the brain from astrocytes, and the brain needs to make its own cholesterol. So you have these blood-brain barrier penetrating drugs that are going into the brain, inhibiting cholesterol and ketone synthesis. Even the less lipophilic ones, like Lipitor, get into the brain really easily. The other ones, there are some that are more hydrophilic. Even they can trickle into the brain a little bit. But you're inhibiting critical processes in the brain, which is not ideal. And also think about all the other things you're inhibiting. You're inhibiting coenzyme Q synthesis, vitamin K2 synthesis. There's data showing that you're dropping levels of antioxidants like MN-SOD and catalase and inhibiting complex 4 of the electron transport chain, which is really scary for people who are afraid of cognitive decline, people like that are carrying the ApoE4 allele, because complex 4 is the one that is characteristically decreased in activity in Alzheimer's disease. And so you're then further inhibiting that complex, especially in the brain. That doesn't really make sense to me. So there seems to be a lot of there are a lot of downsides to consider. You know, if you're not doing anything for your nutrition and your health, then you're probably not going to be someone who's, you know, delving into the downsides or mechanisms that much, and your doctor's going to put you on a statin. And, you know, it is what it is. But if you're someone that is in this space, if you're listening to this podcast, you're in this space, and you're focusing on your metabolic health, then I think the least you can do is have a conversation about those downsides with your doctors, because I know for a fact that those are not discussed. Maybe because the doctors don't know them, but those are not discussed. All those metabolic downsides, and that to me is a little bit scary, because that is not like informed consent of patients. If you're not telling them all the bad things that it's doing to their metabolism, and if they're metabolically healthy, it's like, oh, maybe you can make the argument, you know, your LDL is high, we could just optimize your profile by bringing it down. I'm going to even put that aside. Let's just even say that it's a valid argument, that it's better safe than sorry. What is really better safe than sorry? Because I believe better safe than sorry is not putting the drug into your body that's causing metabolic havoc. For one.
Yeah, no, totally. I mean, that's the thing, is that even if it did have some benefit, you have to weigh it up against the contraindications, right? You have
and those aren't discussed.
Yeah, and from what I know, I don't know. I've never been put on a statin. I haven't even been offered a statin, so I don't know how that conversation goes. But from you know, from
they just say you have to go on a statin if your LDL is above 190 milligrams per deciliter, and I've been told this too. Like they're like, oh, let's get you on a statin. I'm like, let's talk about this. But I have some information most people don't, and then if you have a statin pushing doctor, that's still standard of care. And another crappy thing about statins is that they muddy the data of lipid research, because now they're so standard of care that it's considered unethical to do like placebo-controlled trials. It's usually other drug plus statin, right, or other intervention plus statin in high-risk people versus a statin. So it's already messing up the baseline because it's just so out there. So then there are these other drugs like Zetia and PCSK9 inhibitors, which, you know, if you're going to go on a drug, to me at least, those mechanisms make more sense. So like Zetia, the way Zetia works is it blocks cholesterol absorption in your gut and reabsorption in your biliary tract. So basically your liver is then forced to pump out more cholesterol, and it's depleted of cholesterol, and that brings your cholesterol levels down. One of the interesting things I find about Zetia, and I got this from one of Thomas Dayspring's reviews, even though we disagree, he's a smart guy. He commented that Zetia actually increases HMG-CoA reductase levels in the liver. Increases it, which is the opposite of what statins do. Why? Because it's a compensatory mechanism. Your body wants to then make more cholesterol because you're not absorbing it. So you increase HMG-CoA reductase. This also happens if you, say, are eating lots of eggs and you cut out eggs. In fact, I actually did that N=1. I was eating 1,800 milligrams of cholesterol a day on like an animal-based diet, and my LDL went up to 550. And so I said, oh, what would happen if for 3 weeks I cut cholesterol down to the recommendation 300 milligrams per day. I did that. You know what happened to my LDL? It went up a little bit.
I was about to say.
It went up in just a tiny, it was not a significant increase, but it went to like 565. And then actually my HDL came down 20 points. So overall, like, I mean, anyway, but aside from that, it's like, okay, this is another interesting drug, Zetia. At least it's, if you're going to take a drug, it's more or less local in your gut, and it's increasing the ketone and cholesterol synthesizing enzyme. So that's interesting. And then there are the PCSK9 inhibitors, and I don't know all the pros and cons of these drugs, but again, this is an interesting drug that at least makes more sense to me. So the way a PCSK9 inhibitor works is it blocks PCSK9, which tags LDL receptors for degradation. So in effect, your LDL receptors go up in the liver. And what that does is it pulls LDL out of the blood, and it increases LDL flux, or it could increase it. Basically, the Zetia approach, which also actually increases LDL receptors, any drug that has ever been shown to benefit the heart increases LDL receptors, including statins, actually. There's probably the mechanism by which they maybe help. And so by putting more LDL receptors there on your liver, what you do is you kind of increase LDL uptake, and then you kind of shift towards pattern A phenotype rather than pattern B, because pattern B is characterized by more old LDL in the blood, more small LDL in the blood. So inhibiting cholesterol synthesis doesn't make sense to me, which is statins. Having more LDL receptors, I don't think necessarily is a bad thing. Even if your LDL goes down, it doesn't mean you're decreasing LDL flux in the blood. In fact, DHA, which actually increases LDL a little bit, it decreases small dense LDL, which is the atherogenic form, and it's a natural PCSK9 inhibitor. There's literature showing that I think it was 2.7 grams of DHA increases decreases PCSK9 levels to increase LDL receptor levels. It decreases PCSK9 levels by 12.6%. So there are natural foods that act kind of like these drugs. Plus PCSK9 inhibitors actually lower LDL more than statins. So it's just like, Tro made this really good point during his conferences that, like, you know, we have to operate in the world we are in. And if you need to get insurance and your LDL is over 500, it's not going to fly. So you could go, you know, load up carbs for a little while. But if you're someone, if someone is concerned about LDL, rather than just trying to dismiss them, try to meet them where they're at and saying, all right, at least here are your options. Let's not just say, ignore your LDL or take a statin. Like, there are actually some interesting options out there. I'm, you know, like I said, I'm not medicating myself right now, but I don't think we still don't really know, you know, the effect of really, really high LDLs over the long term. Those data aren't there either. And I think Brett Scher and Dave Feldman do an amazing job of laying out the limits of the literature, because right now high LDL is still considered like 200. And if yours is above 500, we don't know what your health is like over the long term. We just don't have those data. That's a fact. And I think we have to be measured about our comments. And even though I tend to agree with you, high LDL is not harmful. It's just, we need to speak to where the data are so we can be taken seriously by the medical community. But anyway, I just think there are a lot of interesting things out there. The stuff about the Zetia, PCSK9, I was learning from some interesting people.
That's true. I feel that statement about LDL does not cause it is maybe a bit stronger, that you say there's no data showing that it does, is maybe more accurate, right?
It's a factor in people with endothelial damage. Does everybody have endothelial damage? I wouldn't assume so.
Well,
I mean, like, we don't know. I will tell you, and I think she wouldn't mind me sharing her name since it's public in Dave Feldman's page, but Amelia Ferguson, she's young like me. She has higher LDL than me. Hers is running between 600 and 800. And she had Amelia Ferguson, I think her name is. Okay. But she did a CIMT 2 years ago and just got a follow-up. And CIMT, for people who don't know, is carotid intima media thickness. Is kind of like a CAC. It's a coronary artery calcium scan, but it's in the carotid arteries. Is a functional measure for plaque buildup. So you're actually looking at the plaque. It's not just like we're looking at LDL or HDL and guessing about your metabolic health. You're looking at the plaque and you can track how it develops. And in some of the statin trials, they do use 2-year time frames. So this is enough to see, you know, atherogenesis at work. And so you would expect that if LDL high ApoB is sufficient to drive atherosclerosis, in that time, she probably would see an increase. With LDLs between 6 and 800, like 800 at some point, you probably see an increase. Her CIMT went down. Maybe it wasn't significantly down. I think it was like, it's been a while since I've seen it, but I think it was like 0.045 to 0.043 or something like that. But it went down. It didn't go up, at least. So that's just an N equals 1. But it's sufficient, or it's interesting to me, and it's consistent at least with the hypothesis that you can be in a metabolically healthy state such that high LDL is at least null. In which case, why would you add drugs? I'm not saying everybody's as healthy as she is, or maybe if you've been unhealthy long enough, you just have pre-existing endothelial damage. I don't know if I can make that claim. But the fact that there's no data showing that high LDL alone is sufficient to drive atherosclerosis, cases like Amelia's, and the fact that if you look at statin trials that show efficacy, if you look at like the LDL, the lipid triad where you have high triglycerides, low HDL, and high LDL, they work. But then if you look at people with just high LDL, they don't work. All this suggests to me that it's not something to be afraid of. And if you are afraid of it, I just think it's also then important to be considerate about your options. And I'm not anti-Western medicine, but I am, at least right now, my opinions are always subject to change, kind of anti-statin. PCSK9 and Zetia, more interesting options. I'm actually wanting to try to shift some family members who are not going to come off LDL medications because they're, secondary prevention, to at least, shift from a statin to like a Zetia and a PCSK9. So it's a really interesting area, and there's just like so much new stuff coming out about like Lp(a) and Lp(a) drugs and different types of HDL, and it's a really complicated field. But there's some really cool people that are really driving it forward, like Dave. I love Dave.
Yeah, but it does make you realize that people speak with such authority about what doesn't cause atherosclerosis, but in the truth is that we don't actually know very much about it at all.
Yeah,
and that's yeah. But that bothers me when the doctor tells you categorically that and I suppose, like you say, it's not their fault. That's what they get taught, right? They're just regurgitating what they get taught. I would love to be a fly on the wall, just so people know you got a PhD when you were at Oxford, right?
Yeah.
Just quickly, what was the PhD in?
It was in neuro-metabolism, specifically ketones in neurodegenerative disease.
And now you're enrolled, or you're about to start on doing your MD at Harvard, right?
Yeah. So I got as I was finishing up undergrad, I got into Harvard, and then I got a scholarship to go to Oxford. So Harvard let me defer. So I've been deferring them for 3 years now. I have to go do my MD, but I think it's going to be fun. I'm a little bit afraid of what I'm going to hear.
That's what I was about to say. I want to be a fly on the wall there at some of those lectures.
It's not going to be good for my cortisol, I'll tell you. I'm either going to get expelled or have a bleeding bottom lip for like half my time there. Because I've already spent some, getting integrated into the community a little bit. I try to start a food as medicine like elective because of the Zoom fatigue among the students that I don't know how successful it's been, but it's been fun. So I'm really going to try to push this, while I'm there. We'll see how much receptivity there is. I'll be honest, there's some wonderful people there. Chris Palmer's there, David Ludwig's there. In fact, I'm talking with Dr. Ludwig in less than 2 hours. He saw my documentary and reached out. I was so touched. I'm really excited to talk to him because he's one of my heroes. But they're there, and I've met some other docs there. I have at least 2 Harvard MDs that have gone from being low fat to low carb since they've met me. So I'm pretty proud of that as well.
You've actually converted them.
Yep.
That's very impressive. That's cool.
And not intentionally, but like we started, and then they were asking me about some of my clients, I guess I call them, because I can't really have patients, I guess, until I have an MD. But and they just, a lot of them are really open to data. They're smart people. They just haven't been exposed. And if you approach them in the right way, and I think that's the tricky thing, maybe that above all else is what I'm trying to hammer home. And I am no pro at it. Adele Height is, because I get frustrated. I think just like you get frustrated and you just want to like shout at people, but just, you know, thinking about how you approach people, thinking about how you approach their doctors. And this is something I was trying to touch upon at the beginning of the podcast when I'm saying, well, let's not doctor bash, because the last thing I want to come off as is a zealot, even though I feel so strongly about these things. It's about asking questions and just kind of like planting the seeds and letting the data come out there, because this nutrition and food stuff, it's so personal. When you try to push people, the first thing they're going to do is retract. So ask questions. And I'm just finding that people are really receptive. Even people that are, you know, more status quo, they're like, this is at least interesting. And maybe then they'll give you a platform, or then they want to hear from you, or they'll let you, you know, refer them to other people to get their perspectives. I think that's how we're going to grow. But yeah, there are some great people at Harvard, and there's people I don't love as much. I'm not going to name names because I think I can get in trouble. This is going to be online. I don't want to get expelled before I get there. But I think that's going to be great. And I'm also, I think my age cohort is vulnerable to getting this, which is a good thing. Maybe I shouldn't use the word vulnerable, that has a negative connotation, but from the people I've met, I think that this will begin to spread like wildfire once it catches, and SMHP is going to be the match. Not to plug it, like I genuinely am just that excited. I'm definitely putting. I will also say I'm very proud to say I was the first to go through there were people that were accredited before me, but the standard accreditation pathway to get my metabolic health practitioner MHP license, and I'm already putting it after my PhD. And when I'm an MD PhD, it's going to be MD PhD MHP.
I saw that.
I even such a critical title.
Yeah, no, that's awesome, and I really do believe that that's going to be something that that a lot of people are going to strive for, which is pretty cool.
Oh, and one of my now keto curious Harvard colleagues, MD, is pursuing her MHP.
That's very cool. So I was just saying, your on our what we've called our free education page on the SMHP site is really something that I never considered before. We've got so much training for the people that get it, right? So to teach them more and eventually help them to get accredited.
Yeah.
But what was pointed out at one of the meetings, I think that you were in, it might have even been you that brought it up, was like, what about the skeptic? What about the person, either the uninformed or the skeptical person, or the person that's got their head in the sand or whatever? We need to reach those people. And so that a lot of that stuff on that free education is really focused at those people who are coming in there to kick the tires, you know, to try and understand, oh, this is actually maybe something that I should take seriously. And I just put your little video that we talked about at the beginning that you made about your story and everything. I've actually put that in there because I think it's already, in 5 minutes, people can see that this whole nutritional approach to dealing with these metabolic issues might be something at the very least that they should take a look at and consider. But what I was kind of getting to was that you're wise beyond your age, Nick, and you're talking about ways to reach these people that without being like me and like getting in their face about it, right? And so I think I'm asking you now, like we need to maybe do some presentations, like do something that we can put on that page that literally does exactly that talks to people with that, like planting the seeds as opposed to getting in their face.
Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about that. And I'm working with some people. I have some stuff that'll be coming up with regards to my book, like short 5-minute, 10-minute lectures on saturated fat with associated blogs, cholesterol, omegas. The one for omegas is already up. You can look it up. We can link it in the show notes. It's 5 minutes. It comes with a blog. So short, punchy things where I think people have short attention spans, and you can make it fun and brief. So we can definitely work on that. And
yeah, let's do that.
And get some people involved. I think it's, the little bits, planting the seeds is key. And maybe I have a pessimistic point of view, but honestly, I believe that if people aren't ready to hear the message, if they're not at least somewhat curious, they're not worth your energy at this point. It's just going to get you frustrated. Let's direct our energy to the people that are ready to hear some data and consider it seriously. And then we're going to expand out from there. I think we have to be kind of focused on our approach. Otherwise, we're just going to come off as zealous. Even though we are, we just have to
that's a very good point.
Otherwise, you just get frustrated. And I've been down that road, including with family. You just get frustrated because you want to help them. And then you're shouting at them because you want to help them, and then they withdraw, and then you look like a jerk, and then it's just not productive. And it's especially hard with family members. I tried to ask that question a couple times to the psychiatrist there. It's like, how do you give this information? Was I seeing, I think it was Joan. Like, if you have a family member who has a food addiction, how do you talk to them about that? How do you say, give up the damn Diet Coke? You are addicted to this. It's like, no, it's not harmful, and here's why. Here are my justifications. If they want to rationalize it, they will. If they're not ready to hear it, then my maybe favorite doctor in the world, Vivian Lowe.
Yeah.
And if you know my story with her, and that's online at Metabolic Multipliers, you'll know why she's my favorite. She just, the person that I consider saved my life. I call her my second mom. She says that, I've been down this road, Nick, and you can't want it more than the patient. So if you feel you want it more than the people you're trying to communicate to, or if you care more about their health than they do, then just take a chill.
Yeah, then you're on a losing wicket, right? That's
upsetting, but they have to be ready.
Such a profound statement that it's so true.
I think that was a very wise statement. I think about that a lot when I just can't access someone. I just when you're ready, I'm really ready to be here for you. But and I really don't. I hope you don't have to go through what I went through, or something similar to get that motivation. But yeah, it's a losing battle if we're trying to fight people that aren't ready to hear it. But I think more and more people are ready to hear it. And like I said, I think we're just going to expand out. It's just you have to hit an inflection point where this is this is quite legitimate. It's absurd now, the media around keto. I mean, me and Mark Gazella, I just drafted a blog. He's working on it on the U.S. News and World Report ranking of diets, which is just this is a joke. It's headed by a vegan who then generates a list that is completely stupid and arbitrary. How does explain to me this logic? The Biggest Loser diet is ranked in the middle. I think it was number 17. And keto is ranked way at the bottom. There are 39 diets. It's second to last. I think it might even be last for health, below Duca something, some weird diet. And it's just based on what?
Yeah.
Based on your vegan ideology, your vegan low-fat ideology. I shouldn't be vegan bash, but it's just they say, it should be good for losing weight and especially good for preventing diabetes. Have you looked at the low-carb data? What diet? So let's think about the Biggest Loser diet, which again is ranked in the middle for health, results in inevitable metabolic damage. We can talk about yo-yo dieting and metabolic damage, but basically leaves an obesogenic fingerprint on the microbiome, so you just gain weight faster later. It's a crash diet, and you inevitably gain weight back, versus low carb, where you lose weight continuously, improve your metabolic health at the same time, even independent of weight loss. The Hyde 2019 paper, one of my favorites, great RCT. And it's the best at reversing diabetes. The literature shows that. The Verta trial, Unwin's work, it just is. There is where the data are. And so you compare them head to head, it's clear who's the winner. I mean, if Biggest Loser worked, we'd have Biggest Loser reunions, which we don't. And yet keto is arbitrarily ranked near the bottom without any justification, along with all the low carb diets, modified keto, Atkins. I almost think that they added all these weird diets, that some of which I've never heard of before. They were weird acronyms. Noom, I think, is an app. It's not even a diet. And it's ranked up there. there's no like, randomized controlled trials on it. There's a ton of low carb. I think they just add in diet so they can put low carb at the bottom, just arbitrarily. But that's what people read.
That's the thing, is that that's what's in the mainstream media, which is what most people believe. So, but as you said, I mean, this whole concept is gaining momentum and it's getting traction. And unfortunately, a lot of garbage information being disseminated about it as well, which is kind of why we have a job, right? So that we can try and teach people the right stuff and help them to learn how it should be done. But at the end of the day, it's like you said, it's on the cusp. It's about to take off, and it's exciting to be a part of it.
It's super exciting.
Yeah, thank you so much for doing this and being with us. And I look forward to working with you in these committees and stuff, and making the SMHP something to be proud of. Thank you.
Cool. Yeah, I'm thrilled, Doug. And if anybody wants to get a hold of me, you can.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yes. How do they do that?
No. I mean, right. I'm trying to tone down my social media more or less. I think my bandwidth has just been exceeded between research and being a student and blogs and book posts, whatever. But I do enjoy Twitter. And now I guess I have a YouTube channel. That was totally unintentional. I had to figure out what to do with it, because yesterday I put up this video and it's been like 15 hours. I'm getting all these, positive replies. It feels really good. I said that David Ludwig reached out. We're going to talk. So I'm excited about that. And then a lot of people are saying, we're so excited you started a channel. I'm like, oh shit, I started a channel.
Did I really do that?
I just wanted to put this up on the internet. Now what do I do with this damn channel? So I might get active there. My conception for this, I was mulling over on a walk just before we came here. I'm like, look, I don't have the bandwidth to really spend time on this, but I have so many opinions on little things, be it, cholesterol or calories or omegas.
And I think that you were talking about that. You were talking about that a bit earlier, these little 5-minute things of, maybe that could be your thing, right? So instead of being hour-long goodies, it's like these little 5-minute snippets, I
was going to call them Nick's Noodlings, and they were just going to be like organic, off the cuff, like, I had this thought. Let's talk about this for 5 minutes. Nick's Noodling 1. Let's talk about
Keep
calories.
it short. I'm telling you, the shorter it is, people don't drop off.
I'm not going to have like fancy animations or anything, but if it's like organic and honest, I don't know. That's where I'm going to start. People might hate it.
I think it'll be good.
But it might be fun. And then it's just, I get to talk, and I love to talk, as you can tell. Especially about nutrition stuff. In fact, I'll bottle it up. It's like, maybe this is politically incorrect to say, but like for me, it's like at the dinner table, like Tourette's. I used to, like if you bottle it up, it has to come out later. And so I'm sitting, I had this pattern at the dinner table. I always nerd out in the science. I'm like, I read this really cool paper in Cell. Let me tell you about it. It was like, it was about PUFAs and omega-6 and its relationship to obesity. But if you have this particular bacteria that converts the omega-6 into HYA, you're protected, and this is the relevance in XYZ, and here are the haplotypes, and anyway, I can go on forever. You can see I just, my mouth can't go as fast as my mind, but I do that all the time at the dinner table. And my mom has completely just like no more. Well, right now, I should say, I'm living at home between my PhD and my MD, so I'm having dinner with my parents, and I was like, no, science talk's done. So now I have all this extra like science energy that I want to get out. So maybe I'll put it out in the Nick's Noodlings and see how that goes. But even just starting to, you can see like little seeds go off in my mind. I have all these little thoughts, and then I just get all this energy and I want to talk about it. So I'll have to come back at some time, hopefully, if I didn't bore everybody, and talk more about, we talked a little bit about cholesterol, but like not even the tip of the iceberg. About
but I think we should do that. We can.
Whatever. I'm around, especially for the next.
Just if you have something that you're just burning to talk about, then let me know, and maybe we just record something. So.
Yeah, no, I'm always burning to talk, but well, thank you for having me on. I feel so honored to be invited, especially given all your other high-profile guests. I know that I'm totally a neophyte in this area, so it's just a real pleasure to be taken seriously by by all these amazing people. It was so fun. That I was super excited at the conference. I was like posting in the community page, like, look, it's 3 a.m. and I'm following up on Ben Bickman's like paper. This is so interesting. Bifurcation of like, pathways in the liver. This is why, blah, 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 blah. It was literally 3 a.m. So I was like listening to podcasts and lectures before 9 hours of more conferences. And then I get to ask these people cool questions and learn from the vets. So it's really exciting. I don't mean to misplace myself as an expert yet. I think some people have been studying this stuff for 20 years or more. And if I had been studying this stuff for 20 years, it would have been like me in preschool with my goldfish and my juice box, like before I started trying to study this stuff. So I am young and I realize that. So it's really exciting to get to talk to you and everybody else and learn. And, hopefully my value for this is coming with a little bit of energy and being someone with a node within the network, the youth network, the new med students, next generation. So I'm going to have fun with it.
There's, there is something to be said for experience, but you have a voracious appetite for data. So you're gonna learn a lot from that, and then few years of the experience that you add to that, and you're definitely gonna be up there with the Ludwigs and stuff as well as an authority. So I'm looking forward to the journey with you, Nick. It's going to be great.
I am super excited.
Cool.
Super excited. So
thank you, man.
Thank you.
We'll chat next time.
Absolutely. All right.
All righty. Cheers, mate. You've been listening to an episode of the Low Carb USA podcast. You can support us on Patreon at patreon.com/lowcarbusa.